We're going. All right. Well, my name is Jason Warman. I'm a student PTA, second year at Mount Hood Community College, and I'll be interviewing Lisa Flexner today for the APTA Centennial interview. And Lisa, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's so nice to meet you. My name is Lisa Flexner. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I trained at University of Washington, and I live in Bend, Oregon now, where I am the clinical education coordinator and clinical assistant professor for the new doctor of physical therapy program that will be opening up in the fall of this year.
That's awesome. Very exciting. Well, I wanted to start off with our first question here, just to tell us a little bit about your membership journey with APTA.
Absolutely. So I was a career changer into physical therapy. I had worked in the management consulting in the tech industry previously. And I started PT school in my early 30s. Is that right? Yes, that is right. And I basically joining APTA was just expected at University of Washington. And so I joined, and I didn't really know what I was joining for, but I knew that it was a requirement, right? An expectation anyway. Right. And what I discovered was that as a student, it opened up so many possibilities. And this was before people were traveling regularly to CSM or doing the large conferences. But by joining APTA, what I got as a student was access to all sorts of free continuing ed that just made my little student brain explode. I got access to the Physical Therapy Association of Washington, at that time called PTWA. I got access to their annual conferences, and we would close down classes on the Friday and go down to conference wherever it was. And then we also did Legislative Action Day every year, which was all of the PT programs from around the state, along with practicing physical therapists and physical therapist assistants. And I believe the PTA programs as well would go descend on Olympia in Washington and rally our legislators. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that really showed me the power of uniting as a group, and the power that our voices could have when we spoke together.
Very powerful. Agreed.
Yeah. So then I'm going to keep going because there's more. But wait, there's more. I turned down leadership position opportunities within PTWA when I was in Washington, because I was working on my residency and my fellowship, and then I was learning how to teach as an course assistant at University of Washington. But when I moved to Oregon, I didn't have those opportunities anymore. And when APTA Oregon called me up and said, would you be interested in leadership opportunities? I was like, that's a great way to expand my brain in a new and different direction. Absolutely, I'm in. Mm-hmm. So I ran for House of Delegates. I ran to be an Oregon delegate. And that got elected and have not looked back. It is so much fun, and it's fun to be a part of the advocacy efforts. It's fun to see how we're affecting practice here in Oregon and across the country. So I have really embraced my APTA membership and really seen the opportunities for me as a professional to grow and develop.
That's amazing. Thank you. Well, I guess that leads us to our next question is, what is the value of APTA membership to the individual?
So I love this question and I hate this question because to me, it shouldn't be transactional. It shouldn't be, what do I get out of it as an individual? And I think that APTA itself will acknowledge that that was the message for a long time was, and in fact, at CSM this year, the Sarasoli lecture, which is all about PT education, happened to be on professionalism. And Dolly Swisher, an emeritus faculty member from University of South Florida, spoke eloquently on how professionalism has evolved. That was in air quotes. Sorry, it's hard to see on Zoom. How professionalism has evolved over the years. And she pointed out that starting in the 70s up until probably around the early 2000s, professionalism was very transactional. And so you joined your profession because of what you could get out of your profession. And APTA in that era, definitely that was part of it. It was, what can we do for ourselves as a profession? How can we, it was a little navel gazing, let's be real. And sorry for any of you that were in the organization at the time and participated in that. This is not to say that that was the wrong thing to do. It was what was appropriate at the time. But things have shifted in terms of professionalism. And we changed our vision as a profession to be more outward gazing. So the way that I look at APTA membership is, what can I do to support my profession through its professional organization? And what does that get me as a professional? So not just discounts on continuing education or discounts on insurance. I still don't understand that benefit. But how am I benefiting my profession and my community and society by being an active and engaged member?
I love that. That's great. So then my next question is, how does our membership benefit the profession?
So this is where I wanted to circle back to the that legislative action day that we had in PTWA when I was a student, and how I got hooked. That day, which happens every year in April, is really powerful. Because there's this huge group of physical therapists that descend on Olympia from around the state and travel together in packs around the state capitol campus, going and seeing their legislators and talking about issues related to physical therapy. And as a student, the way that PTWA works is that they encourage the students to be the ones to speak about the future of the profession and what they see as needs. And so I had the opportunity to meet my legislator, which I'd never done before, and speak one-on-one as the representative for my district of what we were looking for. And they heard me.
Wow.
And that was so amazing. Like that, I never knew that I could actually speak to a legislator and have them respond and have it change their minds. We were, at the time we were working on, in Washington, it was one of 2 states in the country that didn't allow physical therapists to do spinal manipulation. Washington and Arkansas, that was it. And when we walked into legislators' offices and started talking about why this was the case, and we put it as, this is a requirement for our education, but we're not allowed to practice it. So that doesn't make any sense. We have to teach it in the schools, but we can't actually do it in the clinics. And then it's us in Arkansas, and that's it. And Arkansas is moving faster on this legislation than we are. And our legislators would stand back and be like, we don't want to be the last state in the country to allow this technique that is clearly practiced safely around the entire country. And they heard us. And that was incredible. That was where I really realized that my voice as an individual mattered, but it was only going to be heard in a collective manner. Right? So if I wanted to change things, and let's be real, we're at a state of change right now in the healthcare system. If I want to change things in the way that I think is going to benefit myself, my community, and my profession, and make my life easier, the best way I can do that is by joining forces and joining voices with other people who believe the same, so that we amplify our voices and we create the change that we want to see.
I love that. I love that. phrase. Create the change we want to see. That's
Be the
amazing.
change you want to see in the world, right? It's not new to me.
Yeah, it's a great phrase. So leading me on to this next question, what's one of your most rewarding member experiences?
There are so many.
It's hard to choose.
It is. I love the networking that happens at the annual conferences, the state and national annual conferences. I love reconnecting with friends from all over the country at CSM. I have a friend who she went to school on the East Coast. I went to school on the West Coast. We met when she did a rotation in Seattle, and she lived with me for 6 months. We get together at every CSM. We haven't lived on the same half of the country since that 6-month period, but we get together at CSM every single time that we're both there. But really thinking about the work that I've been able to do with APTA Oregon through the delegation at the House of Delegates, Oregon has really built a reputation of being a small delegation that is mighty. And this well predates me. This has nothing to do with me. But the Oregon has really been seen as a thought leader nationally in some leading edge aspects of physical therapy. And there's a real power in being part of that. But also going to the House, connecting with like-minded folks who are really looking at the vision of physical therapy and what we want to be as a profession and how we want to practice, how we should be practicing, and taking us to the maximum of our scope of practice as physical therapists and as physical therapist assistants, making sure that folks have a voice in that process, and speaking from our experience in ways that influence others. That's powerful. And so I remember the first time that I spoke on the House floor, my first year there, and I was terrified and shaking, and I had my prepared statement, and I'm standing there with my hands just quivering, trying to read what was on the page that I'd written down. And, it was recorded, and it was up on the big screen right in front of me, being broadcast to the 500 people that were sitting behind me, and broadcast live through the news feed. And it was terrifying. And then an hour or two later, I think it was, I ran into APTA President Sharon Dunn in the hallway, and she knew who I was, and she said, "Congratulations, that was excellent."
Wow.
And I had a fangirl moment and nearly melted. But it was like, again, to realize that my voice matters, but my voice has to be in the right venue to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's very powerful. It seems like a lot of people know exactly what they want the change to be, but they don't know where to push that change or where that change can be affected. So
exactly. And what APTA does, in my mind, is helps us have a place to raise that voice and helps us have a place to communicate out, whether it's to legislators or to insurance companies or what have you. There's also value in developing those leadership skills as a PT or as a PTA. We get into practice, and in certain parts of our profession, there's not always a path forward. Once we get really good at what we do, we're a staff physical therapist or a staff PT assistant. And these opportunities for leadership and development are opportunities to help us grow in new and different ways that are really valuable for our own senses of self-worth and our own personal growth.
So that definitely is a benefit for the individual. Again, going back to that.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, I had one last question. Why do you think it's important to remain a member?
I think that's a great question. Let's be real, APTA membership is not cheap. And unfortunately, far too many employers don't support APTA membership financially or with time off. And I wish and hope that we can change that and that we can demonstrate to the employers why that is of value to have their employees be members. Realistically, APTA can only be as powerful as the people who are members. And if you look at the American Medical Association, the percentage of membership in the AMA is something like 80 to 90%. And they are one of the most powerful voices at the federal and state levels for anything having to do with healthcare. If we want to match that, the work that APTA does costs money. It costs money to have lobbyists. It costs money to have staff members looking into policies. It costs money to get on the Hill and advocate to keep the Center for Medicare Services from the 9% cut that they were planning for this year. It takes money to pay for the time and organization to help Congress recognize that telehealth really does work in physical therapy and that these emergency declarations that telehealth should be covered because of the pandemic should be extended permanently. Without membership, we cannot provide enough support for those arguments. Without active and engaged members who are not just raising their voices like I do, but paying their dues, I see it as a responsibility of myself as a professional to support my professional organization so that my professional organization can support me and my employers and my community. We can't make, unfortunately, the way that we work, we can't make change without funding change. And that funding comes from membership. So if I want my profession to change, A, I need to raise my voice and say how I want it to change. And B, I need to actually support the organization in order to create that change.
Powerful stuff. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. That's been extremely helpful, both for me and I'm sure for everyone else listening. Did you have anything else that you want, any closing statement that you wanted to make before we sign off today?
Any closing statement? I hadn't thought about a closing statement, but I'm always good off the cuff. I hope. I don't agree with everything that APTA chooses to do, or that APTA Oregon chooses to do, or that PTWA chose to do. But I know that on a macro level, that it is moving us forward as a profession and it is advocating for the changes that we need in healthcare and health services. And in opening up opportunities for physical therapists as a doctoring profession and for physical therapist assistants to be equal partners in that. And I cannot emphasize enough that even if you don't agree with everything, that your membership is still important and your voice is still important. And the only way that the organization will change in line with what you want is if you join and tell them what you want. You have to work from within. And the organization has been working to try and amplify voices from within and from without and improve its support of voices who may have previously not felt heard. And I see that work, and that gives me a lot of hope that what I'm saying, a lot of trust, I should say, that what I'm saying right now is accurate, that if you join and if you participate, that you can be heard. And that, I think, is what I'll close with.
Thank you again, Lisa. I appreciate you joining me today. Yeah, this has been our APTA Centennial interview.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
And you too. Thank you.